Kimberly Verbeke, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Thank you so much for asking. I'm excited to dive into our topic of discussion today. But before we do, can you give the listeners a bit of context about who you are, what it is that you do?
Yeah, I am a naturopathic practitioner. I have a small clinic in Boerne, Texas, and I work with people, a lot of one-on-one work to help people regain their health from all sorts of things. And the other thing that I love doing is helping people optimize their health, right? So longevity is a big focus of mine from a standpoint of let's not just live longer, let's live healthier.
Absolutely. I think I'm all about that as well. It's amazing if you can live long, but what does that quality of life look like? I'm personally very much about if I'm going to live to 70, I want all 70 of those years to be fantastic. If I live to 90, then hopefully all 90 of those years are fantastic. Maybe, there's certain diseases and conditions that we can't prevent along the way, but at least for the ones that we can prevent and to optimize the best quality for the best quality of life that we can live, I'm totally on board with that as well. So I like that. And what got you interested in that in the first place? Is this been something that's been a pretty big interest of yours throughout the course of your life? Has it been something that you've only recently encountered? Where did it all begin?
I would say it's something I've been interested in for a very long time. My very first job was working in geriatrics in a nursing home and rehab. And I always tell people when you start out at end of life, you get a really good picture of what you don't want. And so I've always thought about it from a context of, right, in America, we're great at keeping people alive for a really long time with a real low quality of life. And I'm just not interested in that. I believe that we can have a long lifespan and age really well and be very healthy into our latter years. And a lot of what I'm interested in has to do with how do we age as well as possible and keep our mobility and our cognition and our strength and, just feel great into older age.
Absolutely. And how has your personal journey changed as you've grown older and have gone through the years? Because of even myself, I know that what I was doing in my teens isn't what I was doing in my 20s or 20s to my 30s. And even though they're still early stages of my life, granted, I already can tell the difference. And I think also when you train from a very young age, or if at least if you're into sports, you put more mileage on your body in an earlier stage of your life. So my mileage might be a little bit more similar to someone who's in 40s or 50s who started in their 20s or 30s, but because I started in my teen years, there's a little bit more mileage there. So I'd be curious to know how you've made those transitions and how you've done them with grace as well.
So I started lifting weights around 15 and have always really, really enjoyed being in the gym. And then in my mid-20s, I started doing some endurance sports, so running some marathons, some triathlons, that kind of thing. Ended up pretty sick, a lot of dysregulation with my hormones and endocrine system, and that led me to how do I stay fit and healthy, because fitness and health aren't the same thing.
No, they're certainly not.
Unfortunately. How do I stay fit and healthy in a way that I can do these things really long term, right? So I look at training now from a perspective of, can I do this when I'm 80 or 90? And the things I'm doing now, I can. I try to walk 6 miles a day. I try to lift 3 or 4 times a week. I love swimming. I love biking. I love hiking. Those are all things I can do into old age. And I do them with the thought process of, I want this to push my health forward, not break my body down in such a way that it's like I have this really long, tedious recovery. And that's a different perspective from when I was in my 20s, right?
Yeah, I can imagine. Also, probably the emphasis on aesthetics as well, right? I think that that's something even I've noticed too. It's that when I train for aesthetics, it doesn't give me the same motivation or same fulfillment that it did once upon a time. Now it's more about how can I execute the movement that I'm doing to perfection? It's more about the technique. It's more about the skill and also doing it so that my body doesn't pay the consequences later down the line in the places that it's not supposed to pay those consequences, right? So
100%.
Have you also transitioned in that way as well, that it's gone less about aesthetics and more about performance and how you feel whilst doing it?
Yeah, I would say when I was in my 20s and early 30s, I was just about make it as hard and grueling as possible, and that's where I'm going to get the most payoff. And unfortunately, that's not the case. I love the hard stuff. I would love to still be doing some of that, but I don't think it really fits my long-term goals. So I had to kind of retrain how I was thinking about things and look at it from the perspective of what is going to give me the biggest bang for my buck, right? What is going to get me way into an older age where I'm still feeling great and I'm strong. Strength is really important to me, right? When you watch people in a nursing home, like they can't squat down, they can't bend over, they're not stable, their balance is poor. Those things aren't fun, you know. Nobody wants to be fed by someone else. Nobody wants, you know, to be an adult and have their diapers changed. Like those things are not quality of life. And so how do I make sure what I'm putting in my body is quality and what I'm getting out of it is quality as well?
How much do you think of it is a little bit of naivety, a little bit of misinformation, a little bit of potentially not taking personal accountability compared to it's just not something that people are aware of? Because obviously, if you say muscle mass to an older person, they're going to be, I don't want any muscle mass. I don't need any of that. I'm not young. I don't need any biceps or anything like that. Whereas they don't realize that that muscle mass is the thing that's going to allow them to stand up from their chair. Like you said, and they can squat down to sit comfortably on their own, or they can reach up and grab something off a shelf with relative ease. But that doesn't seem to completely translate. So I'm wondering how much of it is like a lack of information and how much of it is a lack of personal responsibility. Because of you and I will be aware of these things, but maybe 20 years prior, we might have not had the exposure and access to this information. So how much do you think that there's a blend of the both? How much do you think it's more personal accountability? How much is it a lack of information? Where do you feel that the older generation are standing right now?
So I do think it's a little bit of both. I truly think with the older generation, it was probably more lack of education, more lack of information, where I feel like with younger people, it's more lack of responsibility, right? I mean, they were born with the internet at their fingertips, and they're all real good at finding out the things they want to find out. So I think that with the older generation, they had a little bit more of a mentality, and I have a large geriatric population that I deal with in my office, in my clinic. A lot of them were kind of taught, just listen to your doctor and do whatever he says. Okay? If your doctor's never going to talk to you about like longevity and things that lead you to longevity, where did they learn about it, right? It wasn't as easily accessed. So I think with the older generation, I do a lot of educating of them, and they're very open. They're very willing to learn and try to make changes. I mean, I've been so impressed with some of my little ladies that are in their 70s and weigh, $105. They're tiny, and they're like, okay, how can I get stronger?
No, it's amazing that the transitioning is happening for sure. And I completely agree with that as well. In many ways, I look at both physical and mental health as one of these things where the information just wasn't there and the generation was completely different. But I feel like for the generation that's coming through, maybe the boomers, the millennials as well, I think that they had the information. They might have not had the internet from the moment they were born, but they've definitely had a really good amount of information and awareness that health, both on a physical and a mental level, is extremely important as well. So with that being said, can you break that down for us as well? Like, what would muscle mass mean to someone who's in their 50s or 60s and 70s, one of those ones who maybe care about how they appear aesthetically, but have no plans to be flexing on a beach at any time soon?
I try really hard to get people to think about it from a non-aesthetic standpoint and think about it from a functionality standpoint. So I've got a little lady in her late 70s, and her motto is, I want to die standing up, which I think is freaking awesome. I love it.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, when you explain to someone that you have to have adequate lean muscle mass to have strong bones, right? A lot of the people in that age range are concerned about their bones. They're concerned about osteoporosis, and they understand what sarcopenia is. And so when you start to explain to them, hey, here's how you can avoid this just dying from frailty, it makes sense to them and they can get on board. Educating women that we lose muscle mass faster than men do after 40, right? 35, 40, we start to that decline if we're not actively working to maintain that muscle mass. it's going to fall off. And then other thing I find really, really interesting is women get to a certain age, and not everyone, but I find a large population of my older women, they get a little bit of this strange like repulsion towards meat. They're like, I don't know. I used to love a steak and now I don't. It's really interesting. I mean, I have a lot of older women tell me this. And so helping them understand other ways to get adequate protein is really important. I do a lot of implementing amino acid supplements into their diet to help make sure they're hitting that number. So education goes a long, long way.
Yeah, absolutely does. And do you think that's a societal thing, or do you think that there's something in the way that, I don't know, the amount of protease enzymes that women have in their system as they grow older, it makes it harder to break down that steak, for example, so their digestion is generally uncomfortable? Do you think there's a mix of something physiological, or do you think that it's societal, or where do you stand from that perspective?
I think both of those things could come into play, right? So you have digestion is not as good as we age. We produce less gastrin, less hydrochloric acid. We as females have less testosterone, which helps us maintain muscle mass. Protein synthesis, that's a much, much bigger gap as we age. When we're in our 20s, it takes about 20 grams of protein to create protein synthesis in the muscle. By the time we're 40, it takes 40 to 45 grams. That's a big protein breakfast. Your 2 eggs aren't going to cut it. And so I think there's that side of it. And then there's also this last several years, this real push for vegetarian or veganism. I always tell people I'm not emotionally attached to your diet, and you shouldn't be either. It's not a religion. Your diet should serve you at the point you're at in your life now. And those things aren't always the same, right? What served us in our 20s may not serve us in our 40s. And so on. And so getting people to not be locked in, and dogmatic about their diet, be willing to be open-minded and change their thought process around what works for them at the stage of life that they're in. I think that can be really important.
Yeah, I think it's powerful. So coming back to the essential need for lean mass, how can the older generation go about acquiring that lean mass? Because obviously, again, it's not going to be the same as in your 20s or 30s where protein synthesis is way easier and getting to the gym is way easier. How do we make sure that that continues to happen as we grow older, but we also do it in a safe and effective way? Like you said earlier, like we're thinking about things that we can do in our 80s and 90s, not the thing that's going to bury us into the ground that we might have been used to in our 20s or 30s.
So again, adequate protein, and I'm a big fan of 1 gram of protein per ideal pound of body weight. I think that is a pretty good average for most people to hit. I also tell people they're never going to hit that number by accident.
No, absolutely not.
Right? So you have to do some pre-planning and you have to put some effort into it. And that's where things like an essential amino acid supplement can come in really, really handy. I'm a huge fan of just go walk. You can maintain lean body mass with walking, believe it or not. I've done some little studies on myself just for fun. I have an InBody in my office and, just done some different things where I'll tweak what workouts I'm doing and see if I see a change in my lean body mass. And it's really interesting how well just walking will help you maintain lean body mass. And then getting them to do, other things that create more of a resistance with their muscles, right? I don't like to send a 70-year-old lady that's never lifted weights into the gym simply because I don't want her to get hurt, especially if she's on the weaker side. So I'll recommend things like ARX, where they're working with someone, they're on a machine, and their chances of getting an injury are very, very low. And I've seen some women in their 70s and 80s put on 2, 3, 4 pounds of lean mass in 6 months because we've incredibly increased their protein and their resistance training. So the body's still very capable of doing those things as we age.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's just not underestimating those small aspects and also not thinking that what works for the 20, 30, 40-year-olds is going to work for the 50, 60, 70-year-olds, right? You've really got to address it in a different way and just approach it from a different perspective. And let's kind of transition onto the nutrition part of that as well. Like you said, we're not going to hit 1 pound of protein, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight by accident. Maybe you'll hit 1 gram of carbs per pound of body weight without any effort whatsoever, but protein is going to be a pretty difficult one. So how do you get people to increase the amount of protein they're consuming without them, having to get into like a steak in the evening when really they're just kind of turned off by that at the moment?
I think it's kind of working around it, right? So getting them to do things like, I start my morning with 2 scoops of an amino acid supplement because I want to make sure I hit my number. I weigh 188 pounds and it's a lot of work for me to hit my protein number every day. I walk in the morning and I lift weights several times a week, but I spend a lot of hours in my day sitting. And so I don't have the appetite for a massive amount of food. One of the things I recommend is it's helped me is eat your protein first. If you eat your protein first or primarily focus on eating your protein first, you're more likely to get in an adequate amount versus eating your vegetable or your carb first. And then you're like, I'm really full. I can't eat my steak or my fish or my chicken. I think that when you kind of just try adding multiple little things in with people, you can find success. Some people need things like a protein shake once a day to help them hit that number. My little ladies that have an aversion to meat, I'll recommend things like these little protein pancakes I make. It's cottage cheese, egg, and some protein oats. Throw it in the blender and you can make a little pancake out of it. It's pretty high in protein and they love it because there's no meat involved. And so you can get them to get some high quality sources of protein without eating a ton of meat.
I love that. I think it's just about making it as practical as possible and not being, again, like recognizing, as you said, that nutrition is not a religion as much as people might make you think it is. It really isn't. But there does seem to be a bit of a divide of like team this, team that. But it's like team whatever works for the person, team whatever makes it easy and simple for that person to consume what they're trying to achieve. And I'm also very big on just when I get started with clients, especially when I know that they're not super protein, they don't have a big appetite for protein, is literally just getting them to start with 20, 30 grams extra, like it doesn't need to be that 1 gram per pound of body weight. Initially, that might be a nice aim for us long term, but maybe just to begin with, you just start having 20, 30 grams. In some cases, and you've probably seen this as well, that could be double the amount that an individual is having. I find that it's a little easier for men to be consuming more protein, but I'd say on average that females, they don't tend to go for the steaks quite as much as a man would, for example, just being very, very stereotypical, but based on the averages and the generalizations that we see. So I think that that's also a very good start as well. And then what about other aspects of lifestyle that tie into this as well? Their sleep, their stress, their water intake as well. How do you optimize for those things to help with muscle mass, help with longevity?
I try. Right. When you get into the emotions of things, you get more buy-in from people. People want to feel good. And so when you can get them to see the value of doing certain things and how much it helps them feel better, that's where you win. Sleep. Sleep is an issue for so many people, right? It's just so many people have dysregulated sleep. When you can get people to take a little time and focus on trying to improve their quality of sleep and they start sleeping better and they're like, oh my gosh, I have the energy to exercise now. Like they start to see the value of prioritizing sleep a little more. And that's not so much with older people. That's more, I would say, people like my age and younger. Younger people tend to be like, whatever, I'll just sleep on the weekend or, sleep when I'm dead. Okay. Let me know how that works.
Unfortunately, it might be coming sooner than you want it to.
Right. Yeah. So when you can get people to understand that when you're not sleeping, your body's not healing and repairing the way that it should, that's a huge problem. Your hormones get dysregulated. It's just your mood, everything is not the same. You're not going to have the same cognitive function. Sleep is for people that aren't sleeping well, quality sleep is a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you get that buy-in for those people who are in their 50s and 60s, for example? I know that there might not be that same level of resistance, that same I want to go out and party, or I need to be in the office until 9 p.m. at night. How are you expecting me to go to bed at 9:30 p.m.? How do you get that from an emotional standpoint, or like a real something that really connects with them?
Again, longevity, quality of life as you age. There's certain things that you have to prioritize. And so some things are harder than others. Some people grab a hold of a certain thing and they're perfect with it. And then the other things, it's a constant struggle. It just depends on the person, but really coming from a place of, my goal is to help you age really well and have a really high quality of life when you're old, right? I don't want someone else to take care of me. I want to be able to take care of myself. I'm an incredibly independent person. And so that's something that's really important to me. I think most people want to be able to take care of themselves. Most people want to be able to, open a jar when they're old, or just little things that we kind of take for granted and don't even think about, but become hard to do as we get older and weaker. When you can help them understand that, hey, quality sleep is going to give you these things longer because your body's then able to repair and heal. And when you come at it from, again, kind of an emotional standpoint, I think you get more buy-in.
Absolutely. So it's just connecting with that person on that level. I just think back to kind of telling some of my clients who are a little bit older, but they're very fixated on the fact that maybe they're insomniacs, or they just don't sleep well, or they don't need to function on so much sleep as well. And unfortunately, I think sometimes it takes a kind of a hit from life in the face until they actually wake up and realize the reality of the situation. I think that with many people, it's about presenting those opportunities and those reasons as to why, and it might stick. But for many, it's also going to be until life wakes them up to some sense. And also, I think, as you said as well, like some people will stick with one thing. Maybe they're super good at getting their water in and going out for that walk, but they just can't get that sleep part down. At least that's better than you not sleeping, not getting your water in, not getting your walks in as well. So at least we're tackling one part of the puzzle there. So that's better than not tackling any at all. Although I think, in many ways, I'd prefer people to be getting as much sleep as possible. But that's, something that we have to just give people that space. And I think that once the information is there, then the person chooses what they want to do with it, right?
Totally. And the other thing about sleep that, I found it in my personal life and I've seen it over and over in people, is when they're not sleeping well, if you can get them moving, they start to sleep better, right? When you have a great workout, you just sleep better because you don't have all this energy hanging out there in the body that just hasn't been used up. And when people start moving, their body starts making more energy, right? It's one of those weird oxymoron things that you have to move to create energy. But people start moving and then they're like, oh, I'm tired. I'm actually ready for bed. And they start to sleep better. And so, it's a cycle both ways, the right way and the wrong way. So when you get people doing the right things, one thing often translates to the next is what I see.
Yeah, absolutely does. And do you bring in any supplementation for those of the older generation? Supplementation, again, when we're younger, might look like protein powder, which I don't even really see as a supplement these days. It's more of a food than anything else. But then you might look at things like creatine, a multivitamin, fish oil, potentially if you're looking at your cognition. And those are kind of your baseline supplements. But do you then broaden out a little bit further based on the person and where they're at in their lives?
Absolutely. I think that, our foods are really depleted of nutrients. Our soil's really depleted of nutrients. And then we have all these environmental things that are fighting for our nutrients, right? So I think that you can really amplify your health with the right supplements. I love, just nutritional supplements. And then I love, some of these cool new things that like not new, but not as well known here in the US, things like peptide bioregulators. Peptides in and of themselves are amazing. So I think there are a lot of tools to help people really increase the quality of their life through oral supplementation.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about peptides? Because I think that maybe if you've heard of them, you are not so excited about using them just based on the reputation and the uncertainty and them not being so well known. And if you haven't heard of them, you just simply haven't heard of them because they're not that well known. So can you explain the benefits of those a little bit more? And for those who maybe have, some fears about the side effects, the lack of like well-known knowledge and long-term use of them in certain ways, it would be good to hear a little bit more, because they are kind of semi in that esoteric category, in the sense of like, if you know, you know, but if you don't know, you just don't know, right?
So we have proteins, right, which are long chains of amino acids, over 50 amino acids strung together. We have peptides that people here have probably heard more about in the last several years, things like maybe BPC 157, semaglutide, right, which is sold under the pharmaceutical name of Ozempic. That is a peptide. There are a whole bunch of them, GHK. We've got a whole bunch of these strings of amino acids that are under 50 amino acids strung together. And I'm a huge fan of those for a lot of reasons. And then we have these things called peptide bioregulators. They are 2, 3, or 4 amino acids strung together. Very, very small. They have kind of been brought to light. So where I kind of found out about them was Dr. Bill Lawrence, who is he's doing clinical trials here in the US on them. I guess his training and his teaching on them came from Dr. Kavinson in Russia, who did over 40 years of clinical research on these. And the evidence of what they do for people is absolutely, in my mind, staggering. So I'm one of those people that I don't need clinical research to tell me something prove something works, or for me to believe that it works. I'm a person that like if I take a supplement and I feel better, it works. I can do that math. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of the people that come to see me are that way. But if there's clinical research, how fun is that? Because we just don't get a lot of that here in the US, right? And that's more drug funded research. And so this clinical research on these peptide bioregulators and what they do, I think the most eloquent way I've heard them described is Dr. Bill Lawrence. I heard him say, these peptide bioregulators repair the repair systems, right? So let that sink in. How exciting is that? Again, from somebody that is thinking a lot about longevity and quality of life, the hallmark of aging is we metabolically slow down and things, right? So our repair systems can't keep up. They're going slower. These peptide bioregulators are so small, they cross both the cellular and the nuclear membrane, which means they can bind to the DNA and they can upregulate certain proteins that do that repair work. And so this is a very root cause scenario, which is what I'm trained in. Like, let's address the root cause so that we're not constantly band-aiding a symptom, right? People come to you because they want to get rid of their symptoms, but what they really want is to get rid of the problem. They just usually don't know what the problem is. And so these peptide bioregulators are just really, really cool. And you can use things like True Diagnostics does a kind of a biological age test that is testing your DNA methylation and the length of your telomeres, right? So those little end caps on your DNA, which have a strong correlation to your biological age. The research Dr. Kavinson has done shows that when they would put people on these bioregulators for 2 to 3 years, they would increase their lifespan by an average of 10 years. And Dr. Bill Lawrence is one of the coolest stories. I've listened to many lectures that he's given and podcasts that he's done, and he talks extensively about how he came from a family that did not have great genetics when it came to men. They were all dying in their 50s and 60s. And he's now in his late 70s, the only man in his family to make it there. And so he's incredibly passionate about this longevity project based on his own genetics. And so the bioregulators are kind of an epigenetic switch, right? You hear a lot of talk about genetics and epigenetics now, And we have a lot of things in our environment, things we're exposed to, our way of life, how we're living, things we're doing or not doing that I believe are turning on the wrong genetic SNPs in people. And when you can get something to correct that and repair these repair systems, you get healing that takes place in the body, and you get an improvement in your quality of life. And that's really what it's all about, right? I always say, like, when it's my time to go, I'm okay with going. I just want to be healthy until that time.
Precisely. Just like your client says to you, she wants to die standing up, right?
Yeah.
It's all about just maximizing the years that we have and ensuring that if anything happens, it's not down to our lack of responsibility or accountability. I always think that's a really big thing. It's like, there's many things we can't control in this world or this life that we live, and that's completely fair enough, but let's be responsible for the parts that we can. And it seems like a bit of a weight at times. It's like, oh, well, I've got to exercise, I got to get to bed on time, I've got to eat this and this and that. It's like, well, you're not just doing it for no reason. You're getting a lot of benefits out of it. You're getting the benefits of increasing your lifespan and your health span. And on a day-to-day basis, you feel better as well. So I think it's also recognizing that, yeah, it's an exchange. That exchange becomes easier over time, the more it becomes a part of your habit and routine, and the more that you connect it with the outcome that you're getting as well. And I think that that's really what it comes down to as well. So coming back to these peptides, I'm curious about potentially some of the side effects, some of the disadvantages. Is there any that are kind of quite well known? I know there's a lot of controversy around semaglutide and Ozempic here in the UK as well. So I'd be curious to know, do the type of peptides that you're recommending, do they come with any side effects or downsides that we need to be aware of?
So I heard Dr. Cavinson lecture on this, and I have also heard Dr. Lawrence talk about this. Dr. Cavinson said he had treated millions of patients with them and never seen an adverse effect. That's wild, right? And if you think about it, amino acids are in proteins and things we're already ingesting. So the likelihood of some of them being problematic for people, I think, are very, very low. Can there always be outliers? Sure. I'm not naive enough to say that no one would ever have a problem. But I think it's possible, but not probable would be my assessment based on the things I've studied and learned and listened to.
Totally. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, it's like, you can just try it for yourself. And if you find that things aren't as rosy after you've taken something, or if they are rosier, then you make your decision based on that outcome as well. But if the science points towards mainly benefits and positives, then you can trust that that's probably going to be the case for you. And also, I think that, this is something that makes me laugh about a lot of people, is that sometimes when you encourage them to do some X, Y, or Z with their diet or their nutrition or something along those lines, maybe you've got someone who's on your roster and then they're like, okay, well, I want to cut out all chocolate. And then you're like, well, no, you can have a chocolate bar per week. Don't worry too much about that. Or you can have this, that, this, and that. And they're like, well, but wouldn't that be bad for me? And I'm like, well, 2 weeks ago, your nutrition in your diet, like, for lack of a better term, was absolutely awful.
Garbage.
You hadn't moved in the last 20 years, and now you're concerned about a few sweeteners in a chocolate bar. So I think it's also just that bigger picture perspective as well. And, sometimes I do this as well. Sometimes I drink Diet Cokes or diet sodas or something along those lines. And people are like, but do they not have sweeteners in them? Could they be bad for you? I'm like, that's about what I'm willing to take. There are plenty of other things in my life that could be much worse. I'm working out, I'm eating really healthy, I'm taking care of my sleep, I'm managing my stress, I'm drinking my water, I'm doing all of these things, and I'm still relatively young as well. I'm okay with the sweeteners in my Pepsi Max. Like, just stay away from that for the time being. And maybe that will change at some point in my life, but I think that that's sometimes where a lot of us are very much like, oh, should we take this supplement because I heard this might happen and this might happen as well. Well, give it a go. And also, if you improve every single other area in your life, there is a high likelihood that thing's probably not going to be so bad. And obviously, in this sense as well, when it's a supplement that's supposed to help you, it's not just like a diet soda, then there's a good chance that it's probably going to make things even better, right? Because that's what supplements are there for. They're there to enhance things. And what you said in regards to they are the repair system for the repair systems, it reminded me of like things regarding gut health and the microbiome as well. It's not just taking a digestive enzyme and hoping for the best in terms of your digestion is like, okay, well, what is going on with the gut here? Are we having some issues with the amount of bacteria there? Do we need to populate it more? Do we need to get things functioning a little bit better? And that's kind of what it is now. It's going to the root cause versus just dealing with the symptoms, which are poor digestion. Is actually like, okay, how can we get your microbiome functioning in the best possible way? And that's what kind of reminded me of.
I totally agree. You know, when people kind of move into that space of nitpicking every little thing, I find, and I don't know if you find this over there, but I find Americans in general, we're very extreme. We're very extreme people, right? We are all or nothing. And I personally believe, through my own experience of all or nothing, that moderation is where health lives. I think if you freaking love cheesecake, you should have cheesecake occasionally. I don't think you should have it every day. Nobody needs dessert every day. That's just my opinion, right? I think that when you find moderation, it's much, much easier to be healthy. I think extremes aren't sustainable for most people.
I completely agree. And I think it's a bit of a sliding scale as well. So let's say you've got super extreme on one end, and you've got super flexible to the point that you don't care on the other. It's like most people, maybe there's like 5% of either people in that whole 100% on either end of the extreme. There's the extreme super flexible, I don't care. There's the super disciplined and rigid, exactly, people on this side. And then the rest of us, the 90% of us, sit in the middle. Some of us ease towards the rigid and the structured, and other of us go towards the flexible, but most of us are just in the center point. So we're just deciding, okay, I'm generally here, but which one do I lean towards? And maybe sometimes that changes at different positions of my life as well. And maybe I've been more on this kind of flexible, I don't care side for a lot of my side of my life. So balance looks like actually going to the more extreme rigid side for a temporary period of time to come back to center. And I think that that's something that I think that a lot of people would really, really benefit from understanding, that, like you said, it's not all or nothing. It's not living in these extremes. It's maybe rebalancing yourself by going to another end for a little while. But most of us who are living good quality of life and with good mental and physical health find ourselves somewhere in the middle towards the end of that.
I totally agree. It's kind of an interesting, I always kind of relate it back to alcohol, because I feel like in the wellness space right now, alcohol is totally demonized. And I'm not saying you should go drink a bunch of alcohol, but I also think if you look at areas of the world where there are a lot of centurions, quite a few of them drink alcohol every day. Now, there's some caveats
every day
to
as
that.
well. You know, it's not even just like once a week, it's daily.
No, it's daily, but it's not a crazy amount. And it's done in a very social setting with family and friends and people they love. And so there's all these remarkable health benefits to the whole picture, right? Not just one piece of it. And so I think, you know, it just makes me chuckle, because I hear so many people, there's always something that's getting demonized. And I'm just like, okay, well, this will come back around eventually. And I think if you can find that moderation and be able to have that flexibility with people and yourself, I just think you're generally going to find a better quality of life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. If we're looking at that life, like health span side of things as well, and that high quality of life, that might come with a drink from time to time. And again, what an amazing world to live in when there isn't really anything crazy off limits, right? Isn't it great then something doesn't have to be demonized and you can drink it in a social setting, feeling amazing. Maybe you take a trip to Europe and you want to embrace the wines there. And that's another aspect as well. The quality of these things matter as well. They're not saying they're drinking cheap beer or vodka and Coke or Jaeger bombs or anything like that. They're sipping high quality wine as well. So maybe if you want to do yourself even more justice, is just make sure that you're being very conscious about where your food and your drink is coming from. And that could go a long way as well. So yeah, Absolutely. I love that. And then another thing I want to discuss to kind of wrap up is morning and evening routines. I think that people absolutely love a good morning and evening routine. So I'm curious about what your recommendation would look like for someone who is getting a little bit older, because of a lot of the time it's like, okay, well, I need to get the kids ready for school. I need to get myself prepared for work. And when I get home, I need to get the kids to bed. I don't have any time for myself. I do the chores and I go to bed. So what can that look like once maybe we've gone through that stage of our life, our children are a little bit older, and we can actually be a little bit more intentional. Obviously, it'd be great if we could do that sooner, but I'm curious about the people who maybe, their kids are a little bit more independent now. Their job isn't as full throttle as it was 10 years ago. How can we start optimizing our morning and our evening routines to honor the stage of life that we're going through?
So I will tell you, I've been a person that's lived in extremes and had all these wild biohacking things I did on a regular basis. And I don't know if you've seen there have been some really funny reels going around where people like make fun of it and they're like, fast, but also don't fast when you work out, and cold plunge, but wait, no, and it just makes me chuckle, right? I think, once again, we're a society of extremes. I think you have to find what works for your life and what makes you feel well. So for me, I get up in the morning and I take care of my dogs first thing. I take my amino acids and my vitamins. And then when I'm done taking care of the dogs, I sit on the couch for 20 minutes with a cup of coffee and just kind of enjoy that little calm before the day starts. And then I am literally outside, when it's light enough to see, I'm outside and I start walking. And so I really find that for me, for my body, I'm an outdoor person. I need time outside every day to feel well. I love getting that morning sunlight. I know what it does for my cascade of hormones, for my sleep, for my nervous system regulation. I feel like there's a lot of bang for your buck in taking a walk outside to start your day. That's me. I'm not saying everyone else has to start their day that way, but I feel great doing that, and I've been doing that for several years. I have my gym workouts. Sometimes they're after that, and sometimes I have to be at the office too early, and I have to figure out another time in the day to get to the gym. I've learned to have some flexibility. I'm a person of routine. I love routine. But I've learned that sometimes I have to be flexible. And so I just try to get things in. This morning, I didn't get my full walk in because you and I were meeting, but I know I'll get the rest of it in later when I get home. The other thing that I do in the evening is I'm real cognizant of having low light before bed, because I think that really helps with melatonin production and sleep. And I've always been a great sleeper, and I have periods now where I don't sleep quite as great, and I kind of go into freak out mode because I'm a person that requires a lot of sleep. So I make sure that I'm doing things around bedtime that are going to encourage better sleep, better quality of sleep. But I've learned that for me, I don't have as many hard, fast requirements of myself. I got to get my red light therapy today, and I have to sauna today. I try to, hey, a couple times a week, I want to get in front of my red light. And, I don't sauna much in the summer because I live in South Texas and it's really hot here, and it's like a sauna session walking in the morning. So, but finding little places that I can do things in a reasonable way that just fit into my life, and it doesn't require me being so rigid. I'm learning some flexibility as I get older. It's a whole new thing.
This whole conversation today has been super applicable and nothing super out there at all. It's literally things that people can take on board today and apply before the end of the day. It's genuinely as straightforward as that. I'm not going to use the word simple because the application is sometimes not as simple, but I think that that's the beauty of these things. You're not telling anyone to do anything crazy by any means. You're telling people, get up and get some sunlight on your eyes and your skin, get some movement in, get some protein in, do some form of strength training or any other exercise that suits your body, things that are genuinely practical. But I think that's sometimes what we do. We underestimate the small things done on a very regular and consistent basis because they're not the extremes. But I think that once you can start integrating that flexibility more, it can be game changing. And I think that that's the big thing that I want people to leave with today is that, those, and they're not that small, to be honest. They're small, but they're not that small because going to train every single week, 3 or 4 times a week, it takes some effort. On Sunday night, that slate is wiped clean and you haven't trained for that week. So you have to go fill that quota and tick those boxes again. And I tell my clients all the time, it's each week that you accomplish that is a big win because it's a new week. you start from zero. So the fact that you can get to 3 or 4 sessions is something impressive. But what I like is the fact that it's nothing that's going to break the bank or change your life or anything like that in terms of the way that it looks. But if you can start to factor these things in, like, it will change your life, but in a way that's only going to be positive for you, not in terms of like, my health and fitness routine takes over my entire life. Not at all. It's just that you're doing things that are just going to contribute in so many ways.
Yeah, they're collective, right? They add, you stack those wins, right? When you walk one day, it really doesn't matter. But if you walk almost every day, all year long, that adds up to a lot. And so it's getting people to see those little wins that the effects are cumulative of the things we do, good or bad.
Yeah, exactly. I could not agree more. And I think that that's maybe a young person's lack of perspective. I heard a quote some time ago saying the present moment plants the seed for the future. And that has stuck with me ever since. It's like, that literally is what it is. It's like, if you want to know what your life is going to be like in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time, look at your behaviors today. And if they're not aligning with the life and the quality of life that you want to live, then today is the day to make the change. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. It's literally right now.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And it's never too late to make those changes.
Exactly that. And again, they don't have to be big. Like, everyone, more or less, can go out and get a walk. So if you're listening to this today, go out and get yourself a walk, or listen to this whilst you're on your walk as well. Kimberly, this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I'd love to ask you a final couple of questions. And the first one is, what impact do you want to have on the world with the work that you do?
I would say I want people to understand that they can feel well and they can be healthy and have a great quality of life. It always makes me so sad when people come in and they're sick and they're like, I don't know if I can get better. And I'm really big believer that if you're breathing, your body's capable of healing.
I love that. And where is the best place for people to find you if they want to keep up with the work that you're doing?
Sure. So I'm pretty active on Instagram. My handle is Kimberly Verbeke Wellness. My website, which I'm sure you'll have the link in the show notes, it's avita-wellness.com. Those are probably the two best places to find me. If you reach out to me in either place, I'll make sure to get back to you.
Amazing. Yeah, I see that you put up a lot of reels whilst you're out on your walk, and your husband makes some appearances sometimes as well.
Yeah.
So,
he calls them forced marches.
Forced marches. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that's a nice contrast that people are going to see in terms of like someone who is very excited about their health and fitness routine, and someone else who also does it because they see the benefits, but maybe isn't quite as in love with it as you and I. So I think it provides a nice perspective as well for people to see. But Kimberly, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much. I'll make sure that those links that you mentioned are in the show notes below. But thank you so much for your time today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun talking.